we're going to have a lot to discuss today. I like it. I think there's four big topics. We're going to have, talk about what military aid actually means. Talk about the fact that a country can find $4 billion to give in military aid to a foreign country for a foreign conflict, which, we don't even need to get into which side you're on. Let's just operate on the basis that it's an egregious foreign conflict. A country with its own massive problems, its own hungry children, its own homeless people, its own serious social issues, can't resolve those, doesn't have the finances, the resources to resolve its own domestic problems, but magically finds billions and billions of dollars to finance and supply foreign conflict. Setting aside the fact that, with the stroke of that pen, and we've had now people in the Biden administration effectively admitting that they're funding a proxy war against Russia, and that the reason why it's important to support Ukraine is to support their proxy war against Russia. Setting all of that geopolitical stuff aside, you have a country which literally has its own hungry children. It's got its own overdose problems. It's got serious domestic problems, and it doesn't have the funds or the resources for this, but it has billions of dollars to finance foreign conflict. Same thing goes for Canada, by the way. Canada got the same problems that you got in the US. Record high levels of OD issues affecting the young population. Indigenous peoples who still don't have clean drinking water. Reservations which are still on boil water advisories. We live in Canada. It's a rich country, according to some. Our Indigenous Canadian population, many of them still don't have clean drinking water, yet Justin Trudeau can find hundreds of millions of dollars in aid to finance a foreign war. Donates our military supplies from our own, stockpile, our own inventory, depleting the Canadian inventory, leaving Canada, vulnerable, but I'm not sure who's invading Canada these days, at this time at least. Finds all the money in the world for foreign conflict, finds all the resources in the world for foreign conflict, donated our PPE, our personal protective equipment, to China in the early part of the pandemic, leaving Canadians vulnerable, donating military supplies to Ukraine, leaving Canada vulnerable, in theory. Luckily, we have the US to our south. But people don't, you think of military aid. Oh, well, it's just, they're giving billions of dollars. It's worse than giving billions of dollars to finance, fund, supply foreign conflict. When I was younger, when I was dumber, when I was more ignorant and naive, it's like, okay, well, I can see why people get offended at the idea that the US, with its own domestic concerns, with its own domestic problems, is giving billions of dollars to foreign nations to help them with their defense. And I just thought at the time, it's like, okay, well, they're giving them billions of dollars. That should be, you should, charity starts at home. Fix your own domestic problems before interfering in foreign conflict. And it's even more insidious than that. These military aid packages, they're conditional. They're giving US, Canadian taxpayer dollars to foreign conflicts, to foreign nations to fund, finance, supply their conflict. But they buy those weapons from somebody. They buy back those weapons from the US, from US interests. It's the idea. They're not just giving taxpayer dollars to foreign countries. They're doing it with the condition that effectively, though, those taxpayer dollars come back to various interests, typically known as the military industrial complex. It comes back to those interests. And so what it is effectively like, it's the same type of taxpayer dollar money laundering in the non-criminal sense, in the political sense, that you see with COVID ads, that you see with government advertising on media. They collect those tax dollars. They then spend it in interested entities who they finance, and thus finance them again so that they can get that money back one way, in one form or another. And I was just looking into this today. It's my learning curve in real time. I just cut the share screen. It's my learning curve in real time. Let's just look at what's going on with the Ukrainian aid. Well, let's look at the Canadian. It's interesting. This is the Canadian on a Government of Canada website. Canadian military support. What is this dated? Let me expand this so I can see it. Don't know what the date is on this. Last updated May 6th. Now, let me make sure that we are looking at the same thing, and then we're going to get into the standard disclaimers. We are. This is, Canada's role in, we don't have hungry children here. We don't have Indigenous people here who don't have clean drinking water. We don't have immediate national concerns. Justin Trudeau is looking after international and arguably other interests to the detriment of the people he was elected to serve. Serve, by the way. He serves the people and not vice versa, but you'd think he might have forgotten that. Canada remains committed to continuing to provide Ukraine with the military equipment it needs to defend its sovereignty, freedom, and independence. Since February 2022, the federal government of Canada has donated equipment from existing Canadian armed forces stocks and has entered into contracts with defense suppliers. In the budget, in budget 2022, Canada allocated an additional $500 million in military aid for Ukraine for the 2022-2023 year. Let's just see here. There was the issue about, what else they've done. Now, I'm just going to look for this because I know it's in here. Here we go. It's going to bring us to one of our other points. April 28, 2022. The Minister of National Defense confirmed that the Canadian Armed Forces are training Ukrainian forces on the use of M777 howitzers. Just remember that word. Where else was it? Here we go. April 22nd. The government of Canada announced that Canada has now delivered a number of M777 howitzers and associated ammunition, as well as additional Carl Gustav anti-armor ammunition to the security forces of Ukraine. Okay. That's Canada's contribution to this. Just remember the howitzer for one reason in particular, and the internet can correct me if these dots are unconnected. What's the U.S. doing? And by the way, I appreciate the arguments. People are going to say, well, look, World War II, if America didn't get involved, it would have been atrocious. Until you find out that America was actually arming both sides at one point in time in full awareness of fact and law. Setting that aside, if America didn't get involved in World War II, if they didn't supply the British, the French, the Allied forces, it would have been atrocious. That argument will always be the case in any foreign conflict, which is, in the mind of some, an unjust foreign conflict. It will always be the case. How do you pick and how does a nation which has its own national interests pick and choose? You pick and choose typically if, on the one end, if it's totally egregious, but even then sometimes you don't do anything. If there's no financial interest, you don't often get involved. It's interesting, the global movement to intervene in Russia-Ukraine conflict, but not in other conflicts, which might lead you to believe that there might be other types of incentive, other types of motivating factors. Maybe people get more offended when it's Europeans killing Europeans than when it's other peoples in other nations killing people in those nations. Maybe it shows, if we want to talk about systemic racism and underlying bias, maybe it shows that a little bit. Setting all that aside. There will be that argument. An unjust foreign conflict, someone has to do something. Okay. Then either there's consistent application or there isn't, or you acknowledge at some point in time that no particular nation can be the international policeman in every foreign conflict out there. And why focus on Ukraine, Russia, and not what's been going on for decades in other countries? Well, you can't fight them all. True. You can't fight them all. Now, which ones do you get involved in, and why do you get involved in them? But setting that aside for now, the argument will always be there. You can't let injustice go unchecked. What is the U.S. doing? Pulling this from Al Jazeera, by the way. Oh, I don't want to get to that. Pulling this from Al Jazeera. U.S. providing additional $150 million. This is old. This is relatively old. May 6th. I think there's been updates to what's being provided, but it's good enough. President Joe Biden urges Congress to approve more funds, saying they'll help Kyiv on battlefield and in talks with Russia. The United States has authorized an additional $150 million in military aid for Ukraine, the State Department said, bringing the total of such assistance to $3.8 billion since Russia's invasion of the country began. Okay. We will continue to provide Ukraine the arms its forces are effectively using to defend their country and the freedom of their fellow citizens, said Blinken, adding the military aid comes alongside other efforts by Washington to support Kyiv. Okay. You see the report includes supports to document atrocities committed by Russian troops in their continuing invasion, the top U.S. diplomat said, as well as curbs on the Russian economy. Fine. Let me just see something here, because I think howitzer, what's in here? Yes, here we go. Last month, Washington approved two $800 million aid packages. Here's money, and buy the weapons back. Here's the money that are earmarked for your specific use to acquire certain weapons. It's taxpayer money laundering from the taxpayers of one country to the military industrial complex of that country, to the interested groups, to the powers that be. Some of this money might get siphoned off through various corruption and what have you. Don't ask the government to audit itself effectively. Last month, Washington approved two $800 million aid packages for Ukraine, which included howitzer artillery systems and related ammunitions, as well as armored vehicles, helicopters, and armed drones. So you see what this aid is being earmarked for. We see howitzer come up again. For the fun of it, I just said howitzer. Who owns howitzer? Let me see this here. Let me see. I want to show you my work so that you don't think I'm making this up. No, that's hold on. Who owns howitzer? And let's see if anybody can take any guesses. Hold on. Where is it? That's the criminal code. Majority of Canadians. Oh yeah, who makes the howitzer? Here we go. Yes, people, it's Wikipedia, and we're going to get into an entire segment today as to why Wikipedia, when it comes to anything remotely political, is not just useless, it's actually destructive. It is the misinformation it warns about. We'll get there, but this is from Wikipedia. The M77 howitzer, we've talked about that before. That's what the Canadians are helping people train on, and that's what's being given. That's what's being provided with this military aid. Here's hundreds of millions, billions of dollars to get a howitzer. And we'll train you on how to use it. The M77 howitzer is a towed 155 millimeter artillery piece. It is used by the ground forces of Australia, Canada, India, Saudi Arabia, Ukraine, and the United States. It made its combat debut in the war in Afghanistan. The M777 is manufactured by BAE Systems Global Combat System Division. Okay. I'm an idiot. I'm wet behind the ears, totally naive. What is BAE? What is BAE, people? Let's just see. And maybe I've made a mistake in my homework. And in which case, if I've made a mistake, you can see my notes and you can see my homework and you can know where I went wrong. This is according to CNN Business Insider. Yeah, we're looking at the same thing. Let me just do one thing before I lose it. We're looking at the same document. CNN Business. What do we see here? Top 10 owners of BAE Systems PLC. Now, I presume that that's the same company, or maybe the mother company, but I think that's the same company or related entity. Top 10 owners of BAE Systems. Capital Research. I don't know what that is. Blackrock. I mean, I don't really know what Blackrock is. I just know that I've been hearing their name a lot recently. Blackrock Advisors. Who else do we have in here? Top 10 mutual funds. Oh, look at what we got in the mutual funds. BlackRock Large Cap, BlackRock Global Funds. I feel like that from that Simpsons episode, Mr. Black, BlackRock Japan, BlackRock Enhanced. It's even, I hadn't even gotten to the second page when I first found this. So yeah, it's almost like it seems that the system, the complex itself, has found a way to launder taxpayer dollars from the taxpayers of one country, fund it up to the government. Government takes its cut because government doesn't work for free. Come on, people. Then picks and chooses which foreign conflicts to get involved in, and then offers hundreds of millions, billions of dollars in military aid under the earmark that those monies, those taxpayer dollars, after having gone to the government where the government gets its cut, goes to these entities to be used for specific purchases. And now we see who these interested parties are in these companies who manufacture the weapons that are being given, being donated, being provided. It's quite interesting. Anyways, at least I found it interesting. And if I've made any mistakes in my homework, interwebs, please do let me know. Well, that was the opening. that's the opening, and we're going to get into the standard disclaimers. This is when people talk about military aid, people don't really appreciate how it works. I first learned of this when it came to other foreign conflicts where the U.S. picked an ally and decided they were going to do it this way. And it's like, oh, it's interesting. Okay. I can see why this irritates people, but it irritates people even more. And now I understand why. You're taking taxpayer dollars, siphoning it up to the government, donating it to foreign conflict under the condition that it be basically sent right back to you or your interested contract partners. And everyone in between takes their cut, 10% for the big guy. Yeah, I'm the new Alex Jones. We're gonna get to conspiracy theorists. I mean, at some point, we're gonna get to it with the Wikipedia. Just remind me that my deep thought was that people are not right wing because of their beliefs anymore. Their beliefs are made into right wing beliefs because the individual is branded wrongly as such. It's like we've put the carriage in front of the horse. People, we're through the looking glass. All right, that was the intro. Standard disclaimers now.